On the border between the United States and Canada lies a system of waterways so vast it can be seen from space. These are the Great Lakes, the largest group of freshwater lakes on Earth, stretching across more than 94,000 square miles. They form an entire inland world where water shapes the climate, carves the landscape, and defines the lives of millions. Shorelines stretch for thousands of miles. Storms raise waves comparable to those at sea, and the opposite shore often disappears from view. Lake Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario together form a single connected water system, linked by straits, rivers, and canals. Water can travel through all 5 lakes, slowly moving eastward before leaving the continent. Their story begins in ice. Around 12,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, massive ice sheets began to retreat, carving enormous basins. When the glaciers melted, those basins filled with meltwater, forming lakes that would forever reshape the map of North America. Each one has its own character. The largest and coldest is Lake Superior. It holds 3 quadrillion gallons of water, enough to cover the entire landmass of North and South America in a foot of liquid. Beneath the shimmering surface lies a darker reputation. Superior is known for its Witch of November, fierce hurricane force winds that whip up waves exceeding 30 feet. And because the water is so deep and the fetch is so long, the lake can develop storms that rival the North Atlantic. These conditions have claimed over 350 ships, most famously the SS Edmund Fitzgerald, which vanished without a single distress call. The water is cold, so cold that it inhibits the bacteria that normally cause bodies to rise. As the local saying goes, Superior never gives up her dead. The lake is a remnant of the mid-continent rift, a literal tearing of the Earth's crust that occurred 1.1 billion years ago. For millions of years, lava poured from the Earth, cooling into the hard, dark basalt that now forms the rugged cliffs of the North Shore. Later, massive glaciers scoured the landscape, leaving behind the deep trough that the lake now occupies. As you move along the southern arc of the lake, the rugged basalt of the west gives way to a surreal gallery of colour known as the Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore. Stretching across 42 miles of Michigan's Upper Peninsula, this is where Lake Superior reveals its artistic temperament. But the pictures that give the park its name are not painted by human hands. They are the result of mineral-rich groundwater seeping through the porous rock and evaporating on the cliff face. As the water vanishes, it leaves behind vibrant streaks of colourful mineral stains. Iron oxides paint the rock in fiery reds and oranges, while copper carbonates contribute striking veins of blue and green. These hues mingle with the dark shadows of manganese and the ghostly whites of limonite, creating a natural, fluid tapestry. Deep within the amber-hued forests of the eastern Upper Peninsula lies the crown jewel of Michigan's river systems, Tahquamenon Falls. The striking tea-coloured hue is not a sign of silt or pollution, but a testament to the surrounding ecosystem. As the river winds through vast evergreen swamps, it leaches tannins, natural organic compounds, from the decaying vegetation. This process creates a liquid that looks like dark ale in the deep pools and turns into a creamy, frothy foam as it churns over the drops. It is a literal distillation of the North Woods, a river made of the forest itself. The centerpiece of this wilderness is the Upper Falls, one of the largest waterfalls east of the Mississippi. Stretching over 200 feet across and dropping nearly 50 feet straight down, the sheer volume of water is staggering. Four miles downstream, at the lower falls, the river cascades around a central island in a series of 5 smaller, rhythmic falls. It is a more intimate landscape, where the amber water swirls around ancient rock formations. At the western gateway of Lake Superior, the Wisconsin shoreline fractures into a scattering of emerald jewels. The Apostle Islands National Lakeshore is a place where the Great Sea has spent millennia sculpting an intricate labyrinth out of ancient sandstone. The true magic of the Apostles is found at the water's edge. Over eons, the rhythmic pounding of the waves has hollowed out the base of the cliffs, creating some of the most intricate sea caves in the world. In the summer, the water glows with a spectral turquoise light reflected from the lake floor. As the lake freezes solid, the caves become accessible by foot. Their ceilings draped in massive ice curtains. If Lake Superior is a kingdom of storms, Split Rock Lighthouse is its most steadfast guardian. Located on Minnesota's North Shore, it is a monument to human engineering born out of a single catastrophic night of fury. The story begins with the legendary Mata'afa storm of 1905. In late November, a violent nor'easter tore across the lake with hurricane-force winds and blinding snow. By the time the skies cleared, 29 ships had been damaged or wrecked, many of them along the rock-bound coast of Lake Superior's western end. The steel industry, reeling from the loss of its ore carriers, lobbied the federal government for a beacon. In 1910, the US Lighthouse Service completed the station on a site so remote and rugged that all construction materials had to be hoisted up the cliff face by a derrick and engine. Powered by a clockwork mechanism of weights and pulleys, its lens concentrated the light into a powerful beam that could be seen for 22 miles. For nearly 60 years, Split Rock's eye swept across the dark horizon before being decommissioned in 1969. Most of the heavy-laden vessels, guided by Split Rock's light, were steaming toward the bustling port of Two Harbours. Nestled between the twin natural anchorages of Agate and Burlington Bays, it serves as the industrial pulse of the region. While other coastal towns lean into the quiet solitude of the forest, Two Harbours is a place of the raw power of the Iron Era. The defining silhouette of the town is the massive iron ore docks. These gargantuan structures stretch nearly a quarter mile into Agate Bay. They are a marvel of gravity-fed engineering. Trains laden with taconite pellets roll along the top, dumping their heavy cargo into giant pockets. When a Laker, a 1,000-foot bulk carrier, glides into the harbour, a series of chutes descend, pouring thousands of tons of ore into the ship's belly in a matter of hours. Two Harbours represents the dual soul of the North Shore. A place where the pristine wilderness of Superior meets the iron-willed grit of the people. It remains a working waterfront, a living bridge between the deep earth of the Minnesota Range and the deep water of the Great Sea. If Two Harbours is the industrial pulse of the North Shore, then Duluth is its grand beating heart. Known as the Zenith City of the Unsalted Seas, it sits at the extreme western tip of Lake Superior. The undisputed symbol of the city is the aerial lift bridge, a massive steel span that guards the entrance to the harbour. Originally built in 1905 as a transporter bridge with a hanging gondola, it was reconfigured in 1929 into the soaring vertical lift design. When a 1,000-foot Laker approaches, the 900-ton span rises into the air in less than a minute, allowing the steel giants to pass beneath it with only feet to spare. At the foot of the bridge lies Canal Park, a former warehouse district transformed into a vibrant waterfront hub. Here the lake water is so close you can feel its chill on a July afternoon. Far to the north, the Kaministiquia River reaches a dramatic precipice, plunging 130 feet into a deep, mist-shrouded gorge. This is Kakabeka Falls, often called the Niagara of the North. While it shares its cousin's thunderous power, Kakabeka possesses a different, rugged, ancient character. The cliffs at Kakabeka are a vertical timeline of the planet's history. The river has carved its way through layers of dark shale and limestone that date back nearly 2 billion years. These rocks are famous among geologists for containing some of the oldest well-preserved fossils on Earth. As the water cascades over the edge, it wears away the softer shale beneath the harder caprock, creating a perpetual overhang. Much like the Tahquamenon, the river is stained a deep, translucent amber by the tannins of the upstream forests. Against the dark, crumbling cliffs, the falls looks like liquid bronze, crowned by a permanent halo of white spray. Across the water from the thundering mists of Kakabeka, the horizon is dominated by a silent stone titan. Stretching out into Lake Superior, sleeping giant Provincial Park is home to one of Canada's most recognisable natural landmarks. From the shores of Thunder Bay, the formation perfectly mimics the silhouette of a colossal figure lying on its back. The giant is a geological masterpiece formed by a massive volcanic injection known as a diabase sill. Roughly 1.1 billion years ago, molten rock pushed its way between layers of sedimentary stone, cooling into a hard cap. Over time, the softer surrounding rock was stripped away by the relentless action of Superior's waves and the grinding weight of glaciers. What remains are some of the highest sheer cliffs in Ontario, rising nearly 1,000 feet straight out of the frigid lake. These vertical ramparts are characterized by hexagonal columns of dark stone, creating a dramatic, fortress-like wall. As our journey around the Great Sea reaches its eastern conclusion, the rugged independence of Lake Superior meets a masterpiece of human intervention. At the twin cities of Sault Ste. The lake's water levels drop 21 feet in a stretch of roaring rapids known as the St. Mary's Falls. This was once a formidable barrier that severed Superior from the rest of the world, but today it is the site of the Soo Locks, the busiest and most vital nautical gateway on the planet. The engineering challenge at the Soo is simple yet staggering. How to move massive 1,000-foot vessels between the differing elevations of Lake Superior and Lake Huron. The The solution is a series of 4 parallel locks that act as a colossal water elevator. Unlike many modern marvels, the Soo locks require no massive pumps to operate. Instead, they rely on the sheer force of gravity. By opening a series of valves, millions of gallons of Lake Superior's water flow into the lock chambers, lifting the steel giants. In roughly 45 minutes, a ship carrying enough iron ore to build a fleet of cars is effortlessly raised to the level of the inland sea. After the massive steel gates, the St. Mary's River acts as a winding 62-mile corridor of transition, leading us to the next main protagonist, Lake Huron. Spanning 23,000 square miles, it is the Lake of Islands, hosting the highest concentration of freshwater islands on the planet, more than 30,000 in total. While its maximum depth of 750 feet makes it shallower than Superior, its vast surface area makes it incredibly sensitive to the wind. Huron can suddenly whip into a chaotic chop that has caught many experienced sailors off guard throughout history. Because it sits at the exact same elevation as Lake Michigan, the two are technically a single body of water. However, Huron maintains a character all its own. It is defined by its massive arms, the Georgian Bay and Saginaw Bay. The most unique geological feature is the Niagara Escarpment. Unlike the dark volcanic rock of the north, this limestone acts as a natural filter. It gives Huron its signature turquoise water, reminiscent of the Caribbean. It is this spine that creates the rugged cliffs of the Bruce Peninsula and the high bluffs of Manitoulin Island. Floating in the northern reaches of Lake Huron, Manitoulin is a geographic anomaly, a land of lakes within lakes that stretches over 80 miles long. It is a massive fragment of the Niagara Escarpment that rose from the depths, creating a world so vast it possesses its own internal geography. The island is a masterclass in the nested architecture of nature. Manitoulin contains over 100 inland lakes, and some of them contain their own islands. The largest of these interior waters, Lake Manitou, is officially the largest lake on an island in a lake in the world. A deep and cold basin that mirrors the majesty of Huron itself. The geology of Manitoulin is defined by the Alvar, a rare and fragile ecosystem where thin, alkaline soil sits atop flat limestone pavement. These open, prairie-like expanses are harsh, yet they support a specialized collection of wildflowers and mosses found nowhere else on Earth. Following the jagged spine of the Niagara Escarpment, we reach the jewel of Lake Huron's shoreline. Bruce Peninsula National Park. This narrow finger of land is a place where the geography of the Great Lakes reaches its most dramatic and vertical crescendo. The eastern edge of the park is defined by the sheer 100-foot ramparts. These cliffs are not merely scenery, they are an ancient vertical forest. Clinging to the cracks in the rock are eastern white cedars, some of which are over 1,000 years old. Just a few miles off the northern tip of the Bruce Peninsula lies Flower Pot Island. It is a place where the erosive power of Lake Huron has been elevated to an art form, carving the shoreline into towering, top-heavy monuments. The island is named for its two iconic flower pots. Massive pillars that stand like chess pieces along the water's edge. Because the lower layers of the rock are composed of a softer shale, while the caps are a harder dolostone, the bases eroded faster. The result is a pair of towering stone stacks, often topped with small trees that give them their namesake appearance. At the very tip of the Bruce Peninsula sits Tobermory, a picturesque fishing village and the undisputed gateway to the shipwreck capital of Canada. With its vibrant boardwalks, Tobermory feels like an Atlantic outpost that has been transported to the heart of Ontario. But while the town's docks are inviting, its true allure lies just beneath the surface of the emerald waters that surround it. Tobermory is the staging ground for a protected area that encompasses 22 islands and more than 20 historic shipwrecks. The town's harbour is constantly buzzing with glass-bottomed tour boats, heading out to witness the ghost fleet that rests in the depths. The most famous resident of these waters is the Sweepstakes, a two-masted wooden schooner that met its end in 1885. After hitting a rock near Cove Island, the ship was towed into the sheltered waters of Big Tub Harbour for repairs, but she took on water too quickly and sank. Just a few yards away lies the wreck of the City of Grand Rapids, a passenger steamer that burned and sank in 1907. Together, these two wrecks turn Big Tub Harbour into a submerged museum. While the Bruce Peninsula defines the southern architecture of Georgian Bay, Killarney Provincial Park is its wild northern crown. It is a landscape of shocking colour contrasts. Blinding white mountains, deep teal waters, and the iconic wind-sculpted pink granite of the shoreline. The defining feature of the park is the La Cloche Mountains. These aren't typical dark volcanic peaks. They are composed almost entirely of white quartzite. This ancient rock is so reflective that even on a cloudy day, the mountains seem to glow with an internal light. Billions of years ago, these peaks were taller than the Rockies, but eons of glacial grinding have worn them down into the rolling giants they are today. Killarney exists as a park largely because of the Group of Seven, Canada's most famous landscape painters. In the 1930s, artist A.Y. Jackson was so moved by the unique beauty of the area and so alarmed by the threat of logging that he petitioned the government to protect it. The park's aesthetics, the twisted pines, the white rock, and the dramatic light became the visual shorthand for the Canadian wilderness. As we move to the western edge of Lake Huron, the horizon is suddenly pierced by a soaring monument of steel and suspension. This is the Mackinac Bridge, affectionately known to locals as the Mighty Mac. Spanning the 5-mile gap where Lake Huron meets Lake Michigan, it is a vital cord connecting Michigan's upper and lower peninsulas. For decades, the only way to cross the Straits of Mackinac was by ferry, a process that could take hours. In 1957, that changed with the completion of what was then the longest suspension bridge in the world. Beneath its 552-foot ivory towers, the massive 1,000-foot Lakers pass with room to spare. Building a bridge in the Straits was a feat of daring. The area is notorious for its fierce winds, which can funnel through the gap at hurricane speeds. To combat this, the bridge's lead engineer, David B. Steinman, designed the center spans with a steel mesh roadway. This open grid flooring allows the wind to blow through the bridge rather than against it, preventing the structure from oscillating. If the Mighty Mac is a monument to modern engineering, Mackinac Island is a defiant leap backward in time. It is a place where the 19th century has been preserved in amber, famous worldwide for its white picket fence charm. The most striking thing about Mackinac Island is the sound, or rather, the lack of it. Since 1898, cars have been prohibited. The narrow streets are dominated by the rhythmic clopping of horse-drawn carriages and the whir of bicycle tyres. The air here doesn't smell of exhaust, but of lake spray, pine needles, and the island's legendary fudge. The scent of cooling chocolate has become a permanent part of the island's atmosphere. As you approach the island's bustling harbour, the Round Island Passage Lighthouse stands as a solitary guardian in the middle of the shipping lane. This picturesque light marks a treacherous deep water channel that allows massive freighters to safely navigate the straits. While the other Great Lakes share their shores with Canada, Lake Michigan stands alone as the only one located entirely within the United States. Spanning over 300 miles from north to south, it serves as a massive blue bridge between the rugged Northwoods and the industrial heartland of the Midwest. To the naked eye, Lake Michigan appears to be a distinct entity, but geographically, it is half of a much larger whole. Because it is joined to Lake Huron by the 5-mile-wide Straits of Mackinac, the two lakes maintain the exact same surface elevation. They are, in a scientific sense, a single gargantuan body of water. Despite this shared bloodline, Michigan possesses a unique temperament. The prevailing westerly winds, blowing across hundreds of miles of open water, act as a conveyor belt for sediment. Over millennia, this process has constructed the largest collection of freshwater dunes on the planet. This massive sandy rim gives Lake Michigan its nickname, the Third Coast, offering vistas that look and feel more like the Atlantic or Pacific shores than a mid-continental basin. Stretching like a long, crooked finger, the Door Peninsula, better known as Door County, is a continuation of the same Niagara escarpment that forms the bluffs of Manitoulin Island. The western side, facing Green Bay, is defined by towering limestone bluffs that drop straight into the water. These cliffs are pockmarked with sea caves and topped with ancient stunted cedars that have clung to the rock for centuries. In contrast, the eastern side, facing the open waters of Lake Michigan, slopes gently toward the water, creating sandy beaches and dunes. Because the surrounding lake water acts as a thermal buffer, Door County enjoys a unique microclimate. The water stays cool in the spring, preventing fruit trees from blooming too early and being killed by frost. This has made the peninsula a haven for orchards, particularly tart cherries and apples. In the spring, the peninsula is a sea of white blossoms. Though modest in size, Traverse City has become one of the defining destinations of the Great Lakes region. Known above all for two things, cherries and wine. The city proudly calls itself the cherry capital of the world, and for good reason. Surrounding Traverse City are millions of cherry trees spread across the rolling hills. The region produces both sweet cherries and tart cherries, though it is especially famous for the latter. Tart cherries from Traverse City find their way into pies, preserves, juices, and countless local specialties. But cherries are only part of the story. Over the last few decades, Traverse City has also become one of America's most exciting wine regions. The same waters that make life possible here also create the perfect conditions for vineyards. Lake Michigan and Grand Traverse Bay moderate the temperature, protecting vines from extreme cold and extending the growing season. The result is a unique northern terroir, cool, fresh, and ideal for producing elegant wines. Long before the first Europeans appeared, the area around Milwaukee was known as Milwaukee, meaning gathering place by the water. By the mid-19th century, that gathering grew into a global mosaic. Waves of immigrants arrived, bringing with them a specialized knowledge of craftsmanship and perhaps most famously, brewing. You simply cannot talk about Milwaukee without mentioning beer. In the 19th century, the city became the brewing capital of the world, home to titans like Schlitz, Miller, and Blatz. Unlike many Great Lakes cities that turn their backs on their industrial rivers, Milwaukee has embraced its three-river confluence. The Milwaukee Riverwalk stretches through the heart of downtown, connecting the historic Third Ward to the modern skyscrapers. The inner harbour is still a working port, where massive international salties and lakers deliver grain and steel. In 1871, the blaze of the Great Fire levelled the wooden heart of Chicago, clearing the stage for an architectural revolution. Today, it is difficult to imagine a world without towering city skylines. From New York to Dubai, vertical cities have become symbols of progress and power. Yet the idea of building upward began on the shores of Lake Michigan in the late 19th century. Traditional construction relied on heavy masonry walls to support their weight, limiting how high they could rise. But in Chicago, innovators developed something new: the steel frame structure. An internal skeleton strong enough to support entire buildings while freeing the exterior walls from bearing the load. In 1885, that idea changed history, as the home insurance building was completed in downtown. When the 20th century unfolded, Chicago continued to rise, culminating with the Willis Tower, which in 1973 became the tallest in the world. Along the southern shore of Lake Michigan, giant sand dunes rise more than 400 feet above the lake. But this landscape was not shaped by a desert. The story of the Sleeping Bear Dunes began at the end of the last ice age, when massive glaciers began to retreat. They left behind enormous deposits of sand, gravel, and stone. Later, the wind began lifting this sand from the shoreline and carrying it inland, slowly building these dunes layer by layer. And the name was born of a legend. According to the story, a mother bear swam across the lake with her two cubs, fleeing a forest fire. The cubs never reached the shore and disappeared beneath the water. While waiting for them, the mother bear was transformed into a great dune. And indeed, when viewed from a distance, the silhouette of the sandhill resembles a resting animal. After the massive expanse of Lake Michigan and Huron, the water finds its exit. All the volume gathered from the upper lakes begins a southward rush, narrowing into a powerful liquid highway. This is the St. Clair River, the first leg of the connecting channel that eventually leads to the Atlantic. The journey begins at the Blue Water Bridge, which spans the narrow throat where Lake Huron pours into the river. The water here is a startling, vibrant turquoise, the result of Lake Huron's deep basin clarity being funneled into a channel only 800 feet wide. The river eventually empties into Lake St. Clair. While it is not technically one of the 5 Great Lakes, it is often called the 6th because of its vital role in the system. Despite its size, it is a bustling maritime crossroads. Every freighter travelling from the Atlantic must navigate the dredged shipping channel that cuts a straight line through the centre of this shallow sea. South of Lake St. Clair, the water narrows again into the Detroit River that serves as the international border between the United States and Canada. Rising from the western bank is Detroit, whose name is synonymous with the 20th century American dream. It is the automotive capital of the world, a city of soaring Art Deco spires and sprawling industrial ruins. By the early 1900s, the riverbanks were lined with the massive factories of Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler. In the mid-20th century, it was one of the wealthiest cities on Earth, built of cream city brick and limestone. But as the auto industry decentralized and racial tensions flared, the city entered a long period of decline. The crisis peaked in 2013, when Detroit became the largest city in US history to file for Chapter 9 bankruptcy. At that time, the Motor City was a global symbol of urban decay, a landscape of abandoned ghost factories. But the bankruptcy served as a painful reset, allowing the city to shed billions in debt and begin a steady regeneration. As the Detroit River empties its heavy current, the waters of the upper lakes finally reach Lake Erie. Erie is the 4th largest of the Great Lakes by surface area, but it is the smallest by volume and, most importantly, the shallowest. While Lake Superior plunges to over 1,300 feet, Erie averages only 62 feet deep. This lack of depth makes it the most biologically productive, the warmest, and, when the wind picks up, the most dangerous of the 5. Because it is so shallow, the lake reacts violently to the weather. A phenomenon known as a seiche occurs when strong winds blow from west to east, literally pushing the water to one end of the lake. This can cause the water level at Buffalo to rise 8 feet in a matter of hours, while the docks in Toledo are left sitting in the mud. Because it is the warmest and shallowest of the lakes, Erie is a biological engine. It contains more fish than all the other Great Lakes combined. As the waters of Lake Erie stretch eastward, they are interrupted by a sharp, sand-coloured talon. This is Point Pelee National Park, the southernmost point of mainland Canada. A triangular spit of sand and gravel formed by the collision of two opposing lake currents. For millennia, Lake Erie has pushed sediment from both sides, depositing it into a sharp point that extends nearly 9 miles into the water. The heart of the park is a massive freshwater marsh, protected by the sandy barrier of the Peninsula. A boardwalk winds through this vibrant wetland, where the air is thick with the sounds of bullfrogs. Point Pelee is also a world-renowned highway for migratory life. Every spring and fall, the park becomes a kaleidoscope of colour. Hundreds of species of birds rest here before or after their long flight across Lake Erie. In the western waters of Lake Erie, the shoreline breaks into a scattered chain of islands. One of them, South Bass, is known today as a hub of leisure. Its bedrock is steeped in history that once decided the fate of the American frontier. In September 1813, this quiet cove became the staging ground for one of the most significant naval engagements in American history, the Battle of Lake Erie. Commanded by Oliver Hazard Perry, American forces defeated the British fleet and secured control of the Great Lakes. The victory changed the course of the war. That moment is commemorated by the towering Perry's Victory and International Peace Memorial, the tallest Doric column in the world. Following the war, the island transformed into an agricultural powerhouse. Winemaking has deep roots here. In fact, South Bass was once one of the most important wine-producing regions in the United States. A former manufacturing powerhouse, Cleveland grew because of geography. Founded in 1796, the city quickly became a vital crossroads between the eastern United States and the expanding American interior. The arrival of the Ohio and Erie Canal transformed it into a major shipping and trade hub. Coal, iron ore, and grain moved through its ports. Factories rose along riverbanks. By the late 19th century, Cleveland had become one of America's wealthiest and fastest growing cities. Titans of industry like John D. Rockefeller built fortunes here. But industry came at a cost. In 1969, the Cuyahoga River, slick with oil and debris, caught fire. It wasn't the first time it had burned, but it was the last time the world would ignore it. That fire became the catalyst for the Clean Water Act, sparking a national environmental movement. Today, the river that once burned is a place where kayaks navigate between massive ore freighters. Along the quiet southeastern edge of Lake Erie, a narrow curve of land reaches gently into the lake. It is called Presque Isle State Park, French for almost an island. Connected to the mainland by only a slender strip of land, Presque Isle forms a sweeping peninsula. More than 8 miles of shoreline curve around calm bays and open water. Presque Isle is world-renowned for its ecological diversity, containing 7 distinct ecological zones within its 3,200 acres. Built over thousands of years by waves and longshore currents, Presque Isle Peninsula is still evolving. Sand shifts from one end of the park to the other, storms reshape dunes, shorelines advance and retreat. At the northern tip stands the historic Presque Isle Lighthouse. Built in 1873, it still watches over Lake Erie much as it has for generations. At the eastern terminus of Lake Erie, where the moving water is forced into the bottleneck of the Niagara River, sits Buffalo. The city's destiny was sealed in 1825 with the completion of the Erie Canal. This 363-mile feat of engineering turned a remote outpost into the Queen City of the Lakes. Suddenly, the grain of the Midwest and the timber of the North met the capital of the East at Buffalo's waterfront. The city became a massive mechanical lung, breathing in raw materials and exhaling finished goods. This transition was marked by the invention of the grain elevator here in 1842. These soaring cathedrals of concrete and steel were designed to move millions of bushels of wheat to canal boats and rail cars. Its prosperity shaped the skyline. At the heart of downtown rises one of the city's most iconic landmarks, Buffalo City Hall. Completed in 1931, this towering Art Deco masterpiece remains one of the finest municipal buildings in America. Buffalo was also the first city in the world to be lit by large-scale hydroelectric power in 1896. The source of abundant cheap energy was Niagara Falls, located just 20 miles to the north. Niagara is not a single entity, but a trio of cataracts separated by islands of ancient forest. The most powerful is the Horseshoe, where 600,000 gallons of water per second plunge over a 167-foot precipice. The force is so immense that it has carved a plunge pool at its base that is nearly as deep as the falls are high. In the late 1800s, engineers realised the kinetic energy of the falling water could be converted into power. At night and during the non-tourist season, up to 50% of the river's flow is diverted through massive tunnels into hydroelectric turbines. This diversion actually slows the erosion of the falls, extending their lifespan and ensuring that the thunder continues to roar for future generations. Where the river finally exhales into the deep basin of Lake Ontario, the chaos of the falls is replaced by the calculated elegance of Niagara-on-the-Lake. During the War of 1812, the town was a theatre of scorched earth warfare. In December 1813, retreating American forces burned the town to the ground in the middle of a blizzard. When the British returned, they rebuilt Niagara in the Regency and Classical Revival styles that define it today. Tree-lined streets are bordered by 19th century homes draped in flowers. Church spires rise above manicured gardens. And beyond the town, endless rows of grapevines stretch toward the horizon. It is here that the ice wine industry found its footing. In the dead of winter, when the temperature drops to 18 degrees Fahrenheit, the grapes are harvested while frozen solid. The result is a syrupy, golden nectar that tastes like a liquid gold forged by the lake's steady breath. For centuries, Niagara Falls were an impassable barrier. Ships could travel the vast inland waters of the Great Lakes, but here their journey stopped, unless they found another way. That solution became the Welland Canal. A 27-mile artificial canyon that allows massive lake freighters to cheat the 325-foot vertical drop that once stood as a dead end for global commerce. The current canal functions as a hydraulic staircase consisting of 8 massive locks. To move a ship from Lake Ontario up to Erie, the canal doesn't use pumps. It uses the simple, relentless power of gravity. By opening valves at the bottom of the locks, engineers allow water from the higher elevation to flood the chamber. Each lift takes about 10 minutes and requires 21 million gallons of water. The most dramatic section is the flight locks in Thorold, a series of 3 twinned locks where ships are stepped up the face of the escarpment in rapid succession. As ships complete their final descent through the Welland Canal, they emerge into a vast open expanse. Ahead lies Lake Ontario, the final of the Great Lakes system, and the gateway through which North America's inland waters begin their journey to the Atlantic. While it has the smallest surface area, Ontario is far from the smallest in volume. Because its basin is so deep, it actually holds nearly 4 times as much water as Lake Erie. Plunging to a maximum of 802 feet, the basin is a product of the Laurentide ice sheet, which carved a deep trough into soft sandstones. As the glaciers melted, the land was so depressed by the weight of the ice that the basin was actually an arm of the Atlantic Ocean for a time. Eventually, the Earth's crust began to rebound upward once the ice was gone. That continues today at a rate of about 1 foot per century. This slow motion rising of the land eventually cut the lake off from the saltwater, turning it into the freshwater sea we see today. On the northwestern shore, the lake's broad waters meet one of the most dynamic urban skylines in the world. Toronto, Canada's largest city, and the cultural and economic heart of the nation. Originally established as York in 1793, it was envisioned as a defensible backwater located far enough from the American border. Yet the deep, natural cradle of the Toronto harbour made its transformation into a commercial titan inevitable. More than half of Toronto's residents were born outside Canada, making it one of the most diverse urban centres on Earth. It's not simply a Canadian city, but a city of the world. The core of Toronto is a cluster of steel and glass that reflects the grey-blue of Lake Ontario. At its centre stands the CN Tower, a concrete needle reaching 1,815 feet into the atmosphere. Completed in 1976, it was a statement of Canadian engineering designed to withstand the brutal lake winds and frequent lightning strikes. The precise strategic throat where the wide expanse of Lake Ontario pours into the St. Lawrence River is guarded by Kingston. Known as the Limestone City, it is a place of heavy, silver-grey masonry and military precision. The city is constructed from a local variety of light grey limestone, quarried directly from the surrounding land. The centrepiece of this architectural heritage is Kingston City Hall. Completed in 1844, It is one of the finest examples of neoclassical architecture in North America. Because of its location at the mouth of the river, Kingston was the most vital strategic point in the defence of Upper Canada. On an elevated point near the mouth of the Cataraqui River stand Fort Henry, a massive 19th century fortification. The current stronghold, built during the 1830s, was designed to protect the naval dockyards from potential American invasion. As the lake water enters the river, the landscape fractures into the Thousand Islands. This is a fragmented paradise, a drowned landscape where the ancient granite of the Canadian Shield rises in a literal explosion of topography. While the name suggests a rounded figure, there are actually 1,864 islands scattered across this 50-mile stretch of water. History here is written in the hard, pinkish-grey granite that has resisted the erosive power of the river for millennia. During the War of 1812, the islands were a staging ground for hit-and-run raids. A century later, rum runners used the same deep water cuts to ferry spirits across the international border. The deep, cold water still holds the secrets of those eras, remains of wooden-hulled steamers that succumbed to the river's deceptive currents. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, this rugged terrain became the Venice of the North for the American and Canadian elite. The architecture of the islands shifted from humble fishing camps to sprawling Gilded Age masterpieces. The most iconic of these is Bolt Castle on Hart Island. Commissioned by George C. Bolt, the proprietor of the Waldorf Astoria, the castle was never meant to be a tourist attraction. Beginning in 1900, Bolt spared no expense to transform the island into a testament to his love for his wife, Louise. The project employed over 300 stonemasons, carpenters, and artists who laboured to carve a European dream into the rugged granite. But in January 1904, Bolt sent a telegram to the island with a simple, devastating command: stop all work. Louise had died suddenly of heart failure at the age of 41. Consumed by grief, Bolt never set foot on Hart Island again. For the next 73 years, the castle was surrendered to the elements. Only in 1977, the Thousand Islands Bridge Authority acquired the property and began restoring the ruins. After a long journey through all 5 Great Lakes, the waters continue onward, gradually making their way toward the Atlantic Ocean. It is the final stage of an immense voyage, one that began among ancient glacial basins and northern forests. A single drop of water entering the system through the headwaters of Lake Superior may travel thousands of miles before finally reaching the ocean. The Great Lakes are not simply bodies of water, nor merely a geographical boundary between nations. They are a unique region, an entire world of their own, shaped by forces and rhythms unlike anywhere else. Here, seas can be freshwater. Waves rise like those of an ocean, and the opposite shore can vanish from sight.